Hey guys, Scott Fresener here with the T-shirt report and my good friend Richard Greaves, and this is show number 9.
Correct.
Number nine. Can you believe we've done 9 shows? Anyway, this is going to be a great show. I'm telling you what, we have an agenda for this show. I mean, we're working on putting more meat in our shows, and this is a great show. Mr. Greaves, what are we going to cover this time?
I'm flogging the old horses. Cure. Is it cured? Is it not cured? And why doesn't it cure? Whether it's plastisol ink, water-based ink, or your stencils need to be cured, not exposed, but cured. I also talk about the new magazines that showed up this week and the new Vaztex 6+6, 6 platins on their new V1000 press.
Now, you're also going to talk a little bit about drying. Is a screen going to? We're going to discuss is a screen dry or not. We talked about we're talking about undercured, but we're going to discuss drying. And of course, we have a couple of rants. I have a couple of rants, things that just nag at me, and we joke that we ran it every episode anyway. So it's going to be a great show, and some of the new magazine stuff that's coming out is fantastic. So I hope you enjoy our show. Hey, last show you showed a blank tile, and I'm curious how the tile project has come or not.
Tomorrow.
Oh,
printing them tomorrow morning.
Oh my God! Listen,
so
you promised me you would take pictures of your Jiffy hinge setup. You got the ink.
I'm actually going to print it. I'm going to print it at flying colors.
Oh, you're not going to use your little setup?
No, I could use my little setup, but I thought about the fact that it's only going to be 2 or 3 days before the event, which is Friday, and they just won't dry enough. And so I thought, well, I could print them and then take them. Wait a minute. Mark DeBarrow will let me print at his shop.
Yeah.
And so they're making the screen right now. In fact, there's an approval form from Dave at Flying Colors that I'm supposed to be approving now to make sure the screen gets made today so I can print it early tomorrow morning.
It's a solvent-based ink, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. You have to use methyl ketone or something to clean it up.
MEK, yes, that's
nasty.
Good stuff. Used to drink that for lunch.
I used to print NASDAR ADE on Lawson control panels, things like that. I didn't do all the work. It was really Glenn Canania. I helped Glenn Canania print ADE ink on those control panels.
I was hoping to get a picture of you with your little Jiffy hinge, like with me in Bowling Green burning a screen outside in sunlight last year. I think that would be kind of cool, and there would be a picture of you.
Didn't I send you? All right, I'll send you some, and you can.
I'd like to put it in.
Through the magic of inserts, look, everybody, there I am printing on hat box lids.
But who would know what a Jiffy hinge is? I think that would be another historical thing that they still sell them, I'm sure. But I mean, it used to be that the Atlas catalog, the Advanced catalog, they always had their Jiffy hinges, and I guess you could probably still buy them.
Well, I know that they still sell them at Lawson because I sold them when I was at Lawson. And I have no idea where Jiffy hinge came from. The name Jiffy Hinge. But I've got those old magazines, so I'm going to search.
I met the guy at a show. He was the guy that I think that was his brand name was Jiffy, and he came up to the booth years and years ago. I mean, because we promoted Jiffy Hinges in the first How to Print. I think we still do. Anyway, so the tiles we're going to see next week, and you said you have Billie Holiday music playing. I don't hear it in the background though.
No, because we're recording now. Can't have any of that stuff.
We could have done a little lead-in with a little Billy. Maybe we'll have to do that.
I'll take movies of me printing the tiles.
All right, you got a deal.
On a T-shirt press.
Hey, I see you've been to China recently because you have a picture of a panda shirt behind you, or maybe not.
I've only been putting up older shirts, shirts I printed in the past. And I have to say that this is a favorite of mine. This is a panda shirt, and it's a wrap design. And I have to say that I think we printed this at Coastal Print Works.
Hang on.
But it may have been at Harlequin.
Hold that thought. We're continuing rolling here. It's a wrap design. Now, I'm thinking there are some printers who will have no idea what a wrap is, other than a wrap. You got the shirt.
That's not rap music.
No, anyway. So this is a wrap.
There's the. Now we had to.
Yeah, that's good.
We had to load that on the platen sideways. So that would be a WRAP shirt.
Yes. I like that. It's very nice.
So when I wear it, it wraps around.
Now you may have said this. I may have missed it because I was thinking about the wrap thing. But where'd you print this at?
I have to say,
Somewhere.
I apologize now. I don't remember if it was Coastal Printworks or if it was at Harlequin Nature Graphics. The odds are it was Harlequin Nature Graphics. It's on a skimmer shirt, so that puts it into the 80s.
Okay. But you loaded it sideways. I mean, you loaded it so that the side seam was up or whatever.
Right. When you load it, it's not that difficult, but
it looks great.
You know, at Harlequin, the girls that loaded at Harlequin. See, there's the actual. You know, it doesn't look so odd. You know, it's a big, wide design, but it's under the parts. It's a little more difficult to load because the weight of the shirt is not balanced, so it takes a little bit longer. But once at Harlequin, they did zillions of shirts like that. The coolest design we ever printed at Harlequin was Harlequin Nature Graphics in Fort Myers, Florida. Michael Latona's, the same people, it's Michael Latona that turned me on to Jimmy Buffett when he couldn't print the Jimmy Buffett shirts. That's what made my reputation as a full color process printer. They did a lot of work for zoos because the animals were their big part. And the coolest thing was a duplication of a water tower design for a zoo that I don't remember what it was, but it was a bunch of animals in a line. And so there's a giraffe, there's an elephant, and of course his nose is reaching out and grabbing the tail of another animal as they would be in a parade around a water tower high above something like the Detroit Zoo or something like that. I know we have a water tower like that here for the Detroit Zoo up in Royal Oak, Michigan. And we printed it in 3 goes. So you start by wrapping it around, then you print the second part, and then you print the third part, and you got to get them to match up. And so figuring out a way to intricately do that, we did a shark. So a shark is coming around with a big mouth, and the mouth is ending up there. And then later on, you print a couple of school of little victim fish that are about to go in. And it wraps all the way around.
How would you line them up? Were you using lasers, or what were you doing to line them up?
No, we'd use a dime. You'd tape a dime to the platen. And
so you could feel it.
It would be out of the way, but you would know where the nose of your, let's say it was the shark, so that when you printed the second part, we usually did the big, more complicated part, and then you could always put the little fish or the little something that has to match up to it. And they never touched. It wasn't like they had to actually fit.
It looked like they did. Visually, they were in the same pattern, but yeah.
And so we would use a squeegee that maybe would go off to one side or whatever, but there'd be a dime at the end of the platen, and that's where the nose of the fish would go. And so you'd load it on, you'd be able to see it, or you could see just the little thing. And once you've done 10 of them, you knew just how to load them in. But yes, lasers are the way you do it now. A dime only costs 11 cents. Piece of tape and a dime was much cheaper.
I don't think anybody was using lasers then. I mean, I think lasers were around, but I don't think people were using it for alignment. That was way past that.
At Shadow Graphics, I had a slide projector that I bought at a rummage sale. So maybe I paid $2 for a slide projector. And we had a contraption that mounted it up from the ceiling, and we had different slides that were taped off that showed the white of the lamp as a square or a triangle or a pointer or all sorts. You had about 6 or 7 slides. We put in the slide that pointed there. We adjust it, typically bang it with the hammer, I think, bending it a little bit on the erector set-like contraption that we built. Wish we'd had lasers, yeah.
You couldn't resist. I mentioned Billie Holiday's 100th birthday, and you got a little bit of Billie Holiday going on there. We'll just let it play as like a little bed, below the show. So
we don't want to get kicked off of YouTube.
What's the rules to it? 8 bars or something like that. I forget what it is. So
I like that.
You go there now and you'll find a video deleted by YouTube. So anyway, hey, I don't think there's much industry news. I get the news releases, but usually it's somebody painted their one of the buttons on their machine a different color for news.
Did you buy Cornette at $3 like I did?
Well, you didn't buy it. Great. It opened at 10, but that was the news. It opened at 10, and I got all kinds of news because I'm on the Google thing, and I got all kinds of news. Cornette up 40%. They opened at 10 and they closed at 14. So they were up 40% over their opening price. So they probably made their $100 million. And the IPO was a success. Of course, I think the real key is on a lot of those, and they have all the early adopters can't sell for quite a while, or whatever they call it. There's a name for it, whatever it is. So then in 6 months when they can dump all the shares, then the stock plummets. And so we'll revisit this topic as it goes on. We'll see what Cornette, because my guess is they'll do a news release for the industry about it, that they did an IPO and they're now a public company, and so we'll find out more about it.
But I followed it and saw the same thing, that it went up to 14 right away, and so somebody made money.
We'll see.
Goldman Sachs.
I think that living in Arizona, I get a little sequestered, and I get tunnel vision, because I have had over the years, I can't tell you how many, maybe thousands of times, somebody has asked me, how do I know when my screen is dry? But in Arizona, because it's so dry, even though screeners have drying cabinets and all that, it is not the same. And I discovered when I went back to Bowling Green, and I did some screens last year and jokingly burned some outside, but I struggle with getting them dry. And in Arizona, that is a non-issue. And so I probably have blown off that whole thing, thinking, well, it's dry. You touch it and it's dry, but it's not. So I'm curious your thoughts on how you know when a screen really is dry, because that question comes up all the time.
The most important thing to remember is you need to remove water from the stencil, because stencil water blocks the sensitizer from joining up. Either in a diazo, it joins up with the polyvinyl alcohol, or in an SPQ emulsion, it joins up with itself. But if it's between the two, water just interferes. With diazo emulsions, the diazo sensitizer likes water more than it likes the polyvinyl alcohol that it's supposed to link up with. And so it will go off with that naughty boy water, and that's why for diazo, it's so much more important, diazo and dual cure, anytime that you add it in. So for years, especially when I was new to the industry, I wanted to know how in the world you know that the stencil is actually dry, or when does something bad happen, so that you know that something bad is going to happen. And that's where I started to understand that it blocks the sensitizer, and you'll never know. It's invisible. It's like cancer. Nobody knows that you've got cancer until the doctor explains to you that you have cancer, and you still can't even explain that you had too much water in the stencil, and that's why it broke down. So the number one thing, I thought there must be an instrument. And Majestic, Sati Americas now, they had a control device that you could touch it, and an electro probe that you would put up against the stencil, and would check the continuity, whether electrical charge would go through it. And there are all sorts of drying meters that are used for paper that you'd slip in between reams of paper. And I investigated all these things, and I didn't like any of them. What I do like is using a dehumidifier in the room. That's what's going to pull moisture out of the air and drying the air. That also will pull more moisture out of the stencil, because if you have dry air, Mother Nature always wants balance. And so if the air is drier than the stencil, equilibrium, think of that, equilibrium will balance it out, so that the amount of moisture in the air and the amount of moisture in the stencil will be the same. So if you leave the screen overnight in a dry room, which you can tell by using a hygrometer, which go to buy that at Radio Shack while they're still open, or go to, Amazon.
Amazon, yes.
Amazon.com. Now, I like digital hygrometers because you can actually see the number. So imagine this. You should be coating twice a day, once in the morning, once at night. The guy that works in the shop all day long and all night long is Mr. Dehumidifier. He's constantly drying the area where you're storing those screens. Now, if it's a gigantic room, that's maybe too big a job for little Mr. Dehumidifier. But if you have a cardboard box or a cabinet, you see screen drying cabinets all over the world, and it's just any class of a box with a dehumidifier inside it, and you've got to empty that dehumidifier on a regular basis. Otherwise, it's turns the room into a refrigerator. Imagine this: if you're trying to dry something inside a refrigerator or a cooler, it'll never actually happen. You need to have air flow, but you do that when you go into a room. If you have a dedicated room where you do your coating and drying, not your washing out, because if you're atomizing air by spraying it around in a spray booth all the time, that doesn't do any good because that's increasing the moisture content of the air. So, an isolated area where you can put a dehumidifier and a hygrometer. So, you come in the morning at 7 o'clock in the morning, and Mr. Dehumidifier has been working all night, and the room will be at, you look at the meter and it says 35% relative humidity. To me, that's still not very good, because that means it's never going to take all the moisture out of your stencil. When people are asking me all the time, it's basically a measurement question. So, is 35 okay? I says, yes, but lower is better. Because I don't ever want to give anybody a number to aim for. Lower will always be better. I have never, even in Arizona, I've never been into a room that it was a 5 or 10% relative humidity inside a screen making room. On the opposite end of the spectrum, imagine somebody that's washing out their screens and coating their screens in the bathroom of the office building that they're renting out. So you have a toilet there, an open banister, a basin of water that is constantly evaporating water into the air, just like your screens. So what you want is a room with no water in it. I love rooms with an air conditioner in them because that is typically pushing the hot air out that's created by dehumidification. You know that water dripping off of the outside of an air conditioner? That's because when the air is heated up, it expands, but when it's cooled, it's compressed, and that's what squeezes the water out of the air. So colder air is actually better than hotter air. But hotter air can absorb more moisture. Are you dizzy yet? Are you dizzy? The whole idea...
But how do you know it's dry? It's there all night, so you're going to assume.
Right. When you coat, and you've got a hygrometer there, all you do is you look over when you start, and oh gee, it's 40%, it's 30%, it's 20%. I don't care what it is. You start coating, and literally, by the time you're finished coating, you look over there, the numbers are already going up. And if you come by and you look at it every 5 minutes, you'll see it'll go up 40, 45, 50, 55, 60, 65, and then the dehumidifier will recover, and it'll come right back down again. And when it comes back down to what your overnight low is, you know you've done the best that you could do. Could they be drier? Oh, yeah. But this is the best that you can do. And you've been using screens that are getting blocked all the time with water, and you never knew it. Yet all those screens are actually still pretty good. If you're having real failures, you've got a real critical situation, and you've got to attack that. But I like just using a simple $30 hygrometer on the wall and a $150 small dehumidifier to pull the moisture out of the air. When I first met Ross Balfour at Autotype in like 1983, 1984 in England, we had lunch in a beautiful little grove, and this is the question that I actually asked him. And he told me, yes, Richard, because what I said is, isn't there something we could add to the stencil material so that when the water was gone, it would change color? And he went, yes, of course, Richard. Cobalt salts. And of course, I know that cobalt is a strategic mineral that costs zillions of dollars, and even I got instantly that's never going to happen. So he's giving me the needle, but I laughed. We got it, and I used my hygrometer as the test. Absolutely. Now the next question that everybody, of course, asks is, how long does it take? Now, why are they asking, Scott? Why are they asking how long? It's because they just coated up the screens this morning, and the wife came in and said, honey, we don't have any more 200 mesh. Quick, reclaim that screen, spray water in the air. and then coat up the screen because Mrs. Schmoodle is coming over for the church picnic screens right away, the shirts right away. So the simplest way that you can make sure that this doesn't happen is to coat the day before and make sure that they always dry overnight, and this will never be a problem. Yes, I know you can't do that, but I'm looking at you, screen makers. You're not supposed to leave unless all the screens for tomorrow are coated and ready to go. So that's just part of the screen making job. It's like a firefighter's job. You don't get to come and go at 5 o'clock like you want to. You're a screen maker. You get to sit around with your feet up while everybody else is working, unless, of course, you're the only person in the shop. But screen makers in the big shops that I'm kind of used to, they always get to lounge around and look busy. They're always in that dark room with the lights on, the red lights or the yellow lights on. Red lights are bad, yellow lights are much better. But I'm always making fun of them. What are you doing in there? Oh, I'm coating screens. Don't come in. We wouldn't want any of that cold air to come in. Okay, the hygrometer is your friend.
Have you ever taken a hairdryer to dry a screen quickly because you had to get it burned? I'm just asking the question now.
Heat is not your friend.
I know, but
heat.
But
anything over 105 degrees will kick off the sensitizer. You'll find that if you're looking like this, talking on the phone, you'll find a little hardened area that won't wash out.
Turn the heat off. Just get that airflow going. So anyway, we deal with that in class because in class we have to. We usually coat the night before, if we can, and that way the next day on our 3-day class, the screens are dry, but sometimes we get behind the first day, so then we have to coat the next morning and then lecture for a couple of hours. And then, of course, our problem is always where you're going to put the screens. Usually it's a closet or it's a air wall storage area, and we put black plastic up, but we always take our box fan. Mm-hmm. We do it very untraditional because they're not going to be doing thousands of prints. They're going to be doing a few prints on this screen, but I've taken a hairdryer, but with the heat turned off, of course, just to get the airflow, mm-hmm. just to try and quickly, at a trade show, when that screen pops on the press and you haven't got the spare. So. Anyway.
Now, one of the things that we certainly learned when Glenn Canania teaches the textile tech class on the weekends once a month at Lawson is that there, everybody gets to coat their own screen, and there's where the drying cabinet really comes into play because those screens are ready in 30 minutes. I also did an experiment with Paul Drago at the Ulano Lab in New York in which we literally weighed emulsion. So we poured emulsion into a trough that was on a scale, measured exactly how many grams of emulsion were in the coater, and then we coated the screen. And then we dried the screen to find out, solids content is really one of the things that we're actually measuring for. That isn't the real way we measure for solids, but we wanted to be able to check to see how long it actually takes for something to dry. And it isn't just dry to the touch. We've talked about that in the past. Dry to the touch is just dry as a tomato. Tomato's pretty wet on the inside, but it's dry to the touch. So when your screen is dry to the touch, there's still probably water inside. And the worst villain is the water resistant stencil because they're water resistant, and so the water has a hard time getting out because if there's a cap that's sealed over, there's no water that wants to get through that. So we literally weighed screens. Yolanda had these terrific screens that were made out of plate aluminum that someone had stretched. I think it was Larry from Jericho, New York, that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. He stretched mesh on these flat pieces of aluminum that had a hole cut out, so they looked like a picture frame that had been squashed with a rolling pin, and those were very cool for experimentation and carrying on trips. CD frames also worked real well, but we weighed them before and after, and when they stopped changing weight, I knew they were dry, and we couldn't dry anything. Capillary film, direct emulsion, they all took at least 35 to 40 minutes to dry. Now, direct emulsion has so much more moisture in it than capillary film. Right now I'm showing you 2 little jars that show the amount of water that's in a typical stencil. The small one that has a little bit of water, that's what the amount of water, that's 13 grams of water that is typically in every piece of capillary film, direct film. And the other picture has 35 grams of water in it, And that's what's in a typical regular 25 by 8 or 18-inch textile manual frame.
I'm blown away.
And that's all got evaporated.
That you would have all, I mean, I know because you've worked there, you had all those facts, but I think some of that stuff is probably buried into their internal discovery as opposed to maybe letting it out for the public to kind of, maybe Odano did publish some of this stuff, I don't know, but
no.
But it seems like knowledge that the user might benefit from. But they're going to see it now. You know, from the support logs, this goes along with the topic we were just talking about. I get that occasional question, email, I burned my screen, I went to press, but the image isn't coming through, but I can see it there. And I can see this kind of glossy sheen over the screen. And you and I were discussing beforehand that someone coined the term flowback, which is the screen being. Now, I'm going to use the word underexposed, but you've corrected me and told me that it's not underexposed, undercured. But I've always said to people, you've underexposed your screen and you didn't blot it correctly. And I think we're going to coin a new term called phlegm. It's the phlegm. It's the phlegm in the image area that you can get off with your finger usually, wipe it. But the question often is, how do I know if it's underexposed and what does that mean? Now, you're correct. It's undercuring. I think the industry probably does call it underexposed because it's less exposure time, but you're actually calling it undercuring. But how do they know, and what can they do to prevent that? And we just talked about the water being in the screen. Well, then that changes everything.
The idea that if you say that the stencil is undercured, I believe that resonates with our plastisol friends or even our water-based friends, the textile printers that I assume that we're talking to in the T-shirt report. But the idea that the time can literally vary. Your lamps change. The stencil thickness changes. The mesh count changes. The color of the mesh changes. The age of your lamp. Winter versus summer. Winter versus summer electricity, because when everybody's using their air conditioner in the morning in a heavy summertime, you're probably not getting the same electricity to your lamps. And I think I probably said lamps age.
Yeah.
And if you don't have an integrator, you're not putting out the same amount of energy every single time. So all those variables, and I only started to list maybe the first 5 or 6. There's probably 20 or 30 variables on a screen, and all of them means that they all conspire so that your stencil is not completely cured. I'm sure that I showed the hamburger picture already on this show, maybe not this show, but one of the past shows. Well, then here, underneath now, Scott showed the picture of the hamburger. Now here's something that was undercured. Heat only comes from the bottom, and if you don't flip that hamburger, or maybe a pancake, if you don't flip it over, what do you get? You get raw hamburger on the inside. Imagine it's a screen, so you're cooking it from the bottom.
I watched Shell's Kitchen last night. It's raw! It's like, I'm sorry, when you said a raw hamburger. Go ahead. Continue on with your story.
Well, imagine that if you're only exposing your stencil to energy from one side. You can only cook it from one side. And then the UV energy has to move all the way through the stencil. It may only be 70 to 200 microns thick, but that's a long way for that energy to penetrate, especially if you're using a low-energy fluorescent lamp, low-energy LEDs, low-energy anything. Because if it doesn't get all the way to the inside, it's not going to be completely cured. And so when the water hits it, it's going to return to its Elmer's glue state. Its resin-like state. It'll be sticky. You'll run your fingers on the inside, and it'll be sticky. You'll get color. Here, I'll show you a picture of right now. Look at this piece of newsprint with red color on it. When you're blotting with newsprint, old newspapers work great. If the newsprint sticks to the inside of the stencil, guess what? Yeah. It's still glue.
It's a good tip.
It's still wet glue. Mm-hmm. We talked about you using a fan in your screen room when you're doing things. I don't like fans in the screen room, because it blows the dust around. I'm sure there's no dust in your screen room, of course, because you mop every single day, and it's made out of tile, and it's all hemostatically clean.
No, my screen room is where they store the tables for the banquet room, where you've just got to go, is there anywhere that's dark in this hotel that we can stick screens to dry them? So that we're always, but anyway, we've been there.
Now think about this. It's Sunday morning. You don't have to get up. The sun is beaming through the window. You're sitting there in the bed, and you look at the sunbeams coming in and say, gosh, I'm going to have some coffee and bagel this morning and just sit around, and you just sort of look at the dust bouncing around inside the light stream.
You think?
And you just, that's fun to look at in the 10 minutes that you're just not getting up to get ready to go to church or whatever on Sunday morning. And that's the dust that's everywhere. Everywhere. And that's the dust that will rest on the adhesive that is direct emulsion or even direct films. Direct film, of course, got the plastic sheet on it, but usually that's on the bottom because you need to glue on the inside. So I use the sunbeam story just to scare you. You know, that little bit of dust, it's not really going to block it's not going to block your screen. But it's just to remind you that there's dust everywhere. And when you have a fan, usually people have to get that screen done in 15 minutes because nobody coated the screens the night before. So they put it up against the wall so it's closer to the floor. Then they go get the box fan and they put it on the floor so it's closer to the sand.
Carpeting too, which is worse. So.
Then they turn it on high.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Whip up the vortex of air blowing the dust right into the stencil. Now, if you're not getting pinholes, don't worry about it. And if you're printing plastisol ink, an under-cured stencil is not really a big deal. But if you're going to be printing the stuff that I'm going to be printing tomorrow, you're going to be printing a solvent-based ink. If you're going to be printing a water-based ink, our new family favorites. Ooh, I love that water-based ink. Remember, you're going to take water-based ink and you're going to put it in the under-cured stencil that will dissolve with water. That's the key part of any screen-making function is will it dissolve or will it not? When it's sticky and gooey and on the inside soft and it gets on your fingers, that's because it's not completely cured. And it's dissolving a little bit on the inside. And that's the death of a stencil. Now, if you take water-based ink and then you take that rubber-bladed eraser-like squeegee and you rub it back 50 times, it's going to break down the inside of the screen and it will literally fall off the mesh after a while. That's an extreme example, but when people call up and say, hey, the stencil's falling off, it's because you didn't cure it enough.
Now, we had talked, I think, a couple shows ago about post-exposure. So you don't cure it enough in your exposure. You wash the screen out. It's slimy on the inside. If you rub it, it's slimy. The newsprint will come off. Can they post-expose to then help try and finish? I mean, they've kind of screwed up. It's too late now. It's off the unit, you know. So now can they then post-expose to help fix things?
You can't. Yeah. With SBQ photopolymer emulsions that are pre-sensitized at the factory, they're already grafted onto the polyvinyl alcohol. So they're already affixed, and they don't wash down the drain. And they actually get reoriented as the stencil dries. And, I mean, when it gets wet, it swells up. And then when it dries, it shrinks down again. And so the molecules are all reoriented. And further exposure, especially out in the sun. Here's a picture that you can show right now of me putting screens outside when you're working in the Bahamas. You got the greatest exposure unit right outside. Heat and the UV energy will cure SBQs completely post-cure, but it's recommended that you expose maybe 3 or 4 times longer than your traditional exposure just to cure it properly. Diazo, not so much. Because diazo is just loose, it is not already grafted onto the polyvinyl alcohol, it will wash down the drain, and you'll have real hard time post-hardening, or I'm sorry, I didn't say hardening, post-curing a diazo or a dual cure that has diazo in it.
Mm-hmm. But it can't be, I mean, let's say you put it out there in Arizona for an hour, you go to lunch. You and I both know you go to a screen shop and what do you see out the back door? It's just universal. You see screens outside drying. So anyway, another great topic.
Remember, I live in Michigan. There's still snow on the underneath the evergreen trees outside of the neighbors next
I
door.
had
So
no idea.
they're still there. A
Yeah.
little patch of snow about that big.
Good. Another good topic. Hey, we hammer on trade shows every week, and we joked last show that somebody said the trade show season was over, but it's not over as far as I'm concerned. I'm looking at the list here. We have NBM. It's thenbmshow.com. Arlington, Texas. Have they been to Arlington before? I know they've been other places in Texas.
I think so. Yes.
Must be.
Last couple of years.
You've never been there. You've never been to this
No,
show.
but they stopped using me about 3 years ago.
That's right. Yeah. So that's May 14th to the 16th. DAX show is we talked about it being in Tinley Park in Chicago, April 24th through the 25th. ISS, May 7th through the 8th. And I don't have it in front of me. The Indianapolis NBM show is in June. I'll put the dates up. It's
June 4, 5, and 6, I think.
Okay.
It's 4, 5, and 6, first weekend in June.
And Indy's always been a good show. They've been doing Indy for years. They tried to tie it in with Indy 500 and all that stuff for a while, but I don't think people go to shows for that. But anyway, it's been a good show.
I go on vacation every year, that first week in June, but I'm going to see if I can't get down there for 1 or 2 of the first days and then quick get home and drive up to our vacation place.
Yeah, it'd be good. So those are the trade shows coming up. Other than we have VESPA coming up in May.
Cologne?
In Cologne, and I was talking with Dan Axelson from Workhorse the other day, and they're not going to be exhibiting, but he's going, and I'm not going. You're not going to be there. I think our days at VESPA are behind us.
Nobody ever paid my way, so.
Yeah, I can't get you there, so anyway. Every week we have a rant, and as we joke, we rant about everything anyway, so because we're getting older, My rant this weekend. My rant this week will be really short. I've been in home improvement mode the last few weeks, working on my house and doing some deferred maintenance. It's things I deferred. And I've been painting. I've been to Home Depot probably a dozen or more times. And then the last week, 3 different times at Home Depot, all they had open were self-checkout. And I've got my cart full of paint, and I've got some wood, and I've got some heavy stuff, and I don't want to be picking up that wood and holding it by the scanner and scanning. And to me, it was incredible that Home Depot, of all places, would have no checkers. On one day, I was at 2 different Home Depots because I was working on my son's house also, and he's in a different location in the valley. I went to his Home Depot, no checkers, all self-serve. I bitched to the guy that was helping. Here, let me scan them. I'm the self-serve guy. I come back to Scottsdale. I go to my Home Depot here at night. Same deal. Only self-serve open, and it just kills me. I'm going to start going to Lowe's. So that's my rant. My rant is the customer service. These big box stores. Because I'm going to tell these guys. Did you remember a company called CompUSA? And I remember used to go to CompUSA. There were all these kids, and the same Home Depot. All these guys kind of help you. There's a greeter, but there's no checkers. CompUSA is the same thing. All these kids in red shirts saying, "Hey, you're finding what you want," but you go to pay. And they didn't want to take your money. And what happened to CompUSA? Anyway, that's my rant for today, is I think that this whole thing is changing, forcing people to go to self-serve when they really want that live body helping them check out, at least, especially at Home Depot. So then I will shut up. I know you had an analogy for that. What was your analogy? There's a book.
Well, naturally, there's a book. That's where the answers are. This is a favorite book of last year by Jay Baer that I read about in Jeffrey Gitomer's e-zine that comes out every Tuesday. It's called Utility. Now, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. The title doesn't make a lot of sense. But what he talks about is how the Internet has turned us all into self-service information people.
Okay.
And the idea that we're expected to go do all of our homework, but Amazon has also taught us to pay up front. There's very little credit these days because Amazon, boom, I pay for it, and they also want things to be delivered instantly, which is also a little bit harder. But the idea that if there's no customer service, you're not actually talking to people. And customer service shouldn't be a luxury. It should be, it is how you're going to sell things. I know that every place I've ever worked, if there was a tough customer, I was very happy to take on that challenge. When I worked at Stretch Devices, when I worked at Lawson, they'd escalate to a higher level and they talk to me, and I was always proud because 90% of the time I could turn that customer around and actually sell them something because they weren't being addressed by whomever was talking to them. So salesmen that don't know what they're talking about is just as bad as a website which is what Jay Baer is talking about in utility. He's mostly talking about how to become experts and how to drive people to buy, but it's also answering the questions that people want to know. When we go to Amazon.com and we're shopping around and we want to know one specific thing, and we have to really hunt. They've got all the crap in there. They said, you can put in more music than you can possibly imagine, and you can put all your pictures. No, not all of my pictures, because I have 3 terabytes of pictures. So the idea that we talk to a person when we've exhausted our online self-service info and when you have a real query, and this is why people, in fact, I'm going to mention this later on in Mark Coudre's article that I'm going to discuss later on. That's in Impressions magazine this month, the April-May issue of Impressions. That if you're actually able to talk to a customer, that the information will literally sell the product that you're selling. They're already talking to you. They're there. They're already buying. It may be that what Home Depot and Lowe's are doing with those self-service things is that usually it's so you can get out of there faster because the people with all that stuff are in the way. The idea that there's not even one checker, that seems a scandal to me. I love this book. I love this book.
I told you,
I recommend it.
I get his email newsletter. Well, at Home Depot, my bitch was there's a line of self-serve now. The way I look, there's a line of people waiting to get to the 4 or 5 little kiosks they've got, and nobody is going, we need more checkers up here. And yet you walk around and you're in tools and you got 2 or 3 guys with orange aprons going, hey, you find out what you're looking for? Yeah, why don't you get up front and check and take people's money? But anyway, that's my bitch. So, but I do believe that they're trying to force people to learn to do that. I hate self-serve checkout because there's always that one thing, price check, and if I'm Walmart, I got to put the bananas on there in the scale, then I have to go to the little deal and say it's a banana and how many pounds do I hate that. I'm just not that guy. So anyway, that's my rant for today. Talking about earlier about industry news, I get news releases, but usually it is that release that you wouldn't want to say. A transfer company now has wildlife transfers. That's not newsy. But Michael Fresener had pointed out to me this morning that he saw that Vast6 has now come out with a 6-station, 6-head, 6-station manual press that is their V1000 series. That's a little lighter weight press, all heads down, which we use in class because in a class situation, the all heads down really speeds up the exercises. And their regular press that we have, I'm not sure what the model is so heavy. So you went to the website and saw that it's on their web. They're shipping in 2 weeks. It's the V1000 6/4, 6/6. So I'm not sure if you've done a news release on it, but we discovered it. So anyway.
We didn't call either of the marks to double check on this, but the text still says a 4-platen machine with 6 heads. So the difference is there are now 6 tables, which is excellent help for printing on dark garments. The more platens, the better.
Oh yeah. You have to have people probably asked you over the years, and they've asked me, well, do I need all heads down? What's all heads down mean? It means you got more than one person print. Well, in the average shop, you got one body at one press, and they're kind of loading and unloading because they got the autos over here doing the higher production. So the all heads down is not a feature for a lot of shops. But for guys like me that do training, if you're having 20 or 30 students standing around watching that person print 6 screens and waiting, as opposed to having everybody around the press, and when one person prints, they rotate that, then now 2 people can print, now 3 can print, now 4 can print. It really speeds things up. So all heads down does have its advantages, even in a small shop with no autos, But a lot of guys don't promote that, and I know Vast6 does, Chaparral did, Workhorse kind of does. I think it's extra for some of these guys, and I'm a fan of it for a lot of shops. So anyway, that was our news for today. Vast6. Great, what? Come on, do this. You can do it. Breaking news.
This just in.
You do it so well.
The V1000, now with 6 platens.
Hey, it's time for the book club. And Greaves, you're such an avid reader. I know that you have got something you're reading. You're probably in the car at a light. Maybe not.
Well, Jerry, I can't read in the car. That's frowned on.
Yeah.
No texting in the car.
Right.
But I'm constantly listening. If I'm in a car, if I go in the van, I take a cassette because that's the only car that I have anymore that has a cassette player. But if I'm in my car, I'm listening to whatever I'm listening to through the audible.com. Usually is my favorite place. I've got zillions of books I've listened to over the last 10 years, audible.com. What am I reading? Oh, Jerry the Postwoman brought 2 new magazines in the last couple of days. First up is our old friend Impressions Magazine. There's the new cover.
I didn't see that. I quit getting the hard copy, but I get the digital, so I'll probably have an email today that says the digital copy has arrived. I like the hard copy. I think you are too.
Do you know anybody at Impressions Magazine you might talk to about
it's
that?
fine. I call Marcia. Marcia actually sent us magazines for the last class, so I just have to. I didn't fill out the latest. They send you the survey once a year. It says you
got to fill out the form, otherwise no free mag.
So it's my fault. It'd be my own fault.
So there's 4 major articles that are, everything in Impressions Magazine is good for T-shirts, but I'm really only interested in screen printing. So my apologies to my embroidery friends out there, but if you're listening to this show, you're not listening for the embroidery tidbits. Dane Clement has an article about all over. Now, in the early 80s, all over printing had a renaissance. I've talked about that in the past in these shows.
Everybody had a belt printer. They put these huge belt printers. Yeah.
Well, the point that I made is that the people with carousel-style machines, the advanced people that made the Aero multi-printer, they created gigantic platens, so you could print all-over style printing on a carousel-style machine, but it was Precision and their belt printer that really owned that market. Now, Dane has broken it down into what you really need to know. He didn't really talk too much about the printing. He's talking about the art, but I think it's very worthwhile because I've never seen anything in the 30 years that all over printing has been around that actually goes into this kind of detail. So maybe it's a second wave of all over printing, but well worth reading. Mark Coudray has got an article about digital traffic to your website, and this is really more of the fundamentals that he's building up. He's been very big on this bandwagon for the last couple of years. This is what he's talking about at trade shows, and this is what he's really selling more than anything these days, especially Facebook. Facebook turns out to be the #1 place that he's had great success, and that's where his focus is in this article. James Ortolani, now with Stalls, talks about cap printing. So there's a lot of transfer cap printing there too, but it's about caps, and this is a whole magazine that is focused on caps. And then our old friend Rick Davis. All of these guys, well, Dane is not an Academy member, but the other 3 guys are. Rick Davis, an Academy member. He starts the first of a 2-part series on screen making. Now, this is a pretty basic article, so I'm not turning my nose up to this, but it's in 2 articles. You can cover a nice beginner quality, but again, I remind people that download the stencil making fundamentals from Sati. That's the master book. But Rick's got some very nice pictures, and it covers it very nicely in this. Now, Impressions, sad to say, is trumped by the ASI printer wearables. This is a new issue of wearables, and take a good look at that cover.
That's a lot of colors.
12 colors, but only 6 were used. Now, they're playing that up, and that may be news to people that are only making their work now in computers. Scott, do you remember before we had computers?
The color teller. Zip-a-tone dots. Format sheets, so you can cut those little dots out.
When we used to have to construct, and when we only had 6 color presses, 6 head presses, getting more colors out was definitely something that was real. It was a real important art skill and a printing skill. You had to learn how to use halftones, and I developed great skills in the early days, especially in my days at Shadow Graphics with Jeffrey Gittimer and the lovely Kim Kirky as the artist. The idea was that when we would create a preprint piece of artwork, we'd literally tell the art ladies, okay, you can have 6 colors. One of them needs to be a light color. One of them needs to be a dark color. You get to pick them, because they were actually making and creating the art that we would produce. And then you get 4 colors in between. And from those 6 colors, we could make 96 colors, because we could put a combo of a white, solid white down, or a light color, or a halftone, maybe 20%, maybe 40%, and with 20%, 40%, and 100%, and a mixture of colors. This is what you did with the color teller, Spider's color teller. This is what Kevin Davies did with his magic window that he sold.
Magic window.
Especially when he was
about
with,
that. Yeah.
when he's with.
Was it Taggart? His partner. He had a partner in that.
I never knew his partner.
No, I didn't. But I think his name was Taggart. So, but anyway, yeah.
And my big deal, especially in the early '80s, was making grays. I came from a photography background, and the idea that you could not buy a gray. Now there are all sorts of grays that you can buy, but still mixing black and white together, not high opacity, super opaque whites, but a mixing white where you'd mix 1:1, 2:1, 2:4, 2:8, 2:16, 1:16, sorry. Those fractions of white to black gave you all sorts of different grays that when you put them underneath or on top, commingling the colors, putting one on top of another to find out what final color you're interested in. If people are interested in that, please write us and we'll do a more detailed review of that. But that's what reminded us, because they make a point of describing how they got 12 colors out of using only six colors.
Is there an article?
Screens.
Is there an article
Yes.
about that? There
is an article.
The light bulb. Yeah. As we talk about this, I think I'm probably a better separator because I cut my teeth on learning about, okay, I can do a 20% yellow and a 50% red. That'll give me kind of an orange, but it'll be a red or orange. I probably learned a lot from the old days, and now as a separator, I think I'm probably better because I learned it the old way, the old school way. Do you think wearables was wearables thicker than impressions, or did you just said it trumped the article?
No, just the theme is how to print a better T-shirt. And there's 6 articles that are all about T-shirt printing. It starts out with, let's see, I've got these bookmarks here. How to build a better T-shirt. Charlie Talley's got an article in here about how to take one-color designs and really snap them up. So he shows people how to weave. You literally cut a T-shirt in the back and reweave things together. Now, this is very hand-heavy work. He also shows how foil works. These are things that are not necessarily new, but it's exposing people to this simplicity. I love foil, especially when a hot shirt comes out of the oven. You have a simple one-color design. In the article, Charlie used a picture of a big kiss. So it's a woman's lips,
Perfect.
like lipstick.
Perfect, yeah.
And comes out with gray ink or some cheap, ink. Comes out, immediately hit it with with red foil. Hit it with an eraser. I'm not going to explain how to do foiling here, but again, if that's something you want to learn, here in Wearables Magazine is the place to look at it. Again, you go to Wearables, and you can actually flip through on the digital version of the magazine. Of course, I like the one that you have paper. What else have we got here? There's an article about creativity. It takes imagination, and they showed some very interesting T-shirts. And Cheap Trick, that's Charlie's article. Creative T-shirt print does not have to be complicated, but you need to be. He's got lots of pictures in this article.
Oh, I like that. That's nice. Yeah, that's good.
Charlie's always been very big on step-by-step photographs. He's been doing that in Impressions magazine for years.
Yeah, people like that.
Well, it shows the pictures of how to do it. There's an article about cost control, but the big one that I think is a good thing, why everybody needs the print version, is here's an article about what materials our T-shirts are made out of. So it's a listing and a description of what is it, 7 different styles of materials that are used in making T-shirts. So you got ring spun cotton, polyester, polycotton blend, but then tri-blend, modal, even bamboo. There's no hemp shirts in here yet, so
that's kind of
there's
surprising.
A showcase.
They're out there.
Well, there's definitely a showcase. There's an article about promotional T-shirts, what they should look like. There's an article about going digital, people that are making digital fabric and making shirts and whole dresses. And then, of course, our friends at the Ink Kitchen, Tom Davenport and Rick Roth, have an article about curing shirts.
In Wearables?
In Wearables magazine. So
Wow.
it's called the Ink Kitchen.
I didn't know they were writing for Wearables. That's interesting.
So, but look at what they wrote about. Tom Davenport wrote about transparency that I just sort of covered a little bit when I described about how you can commingle opaque colors and transparent colors. You put one on the bottom, one on the top, and you'll get a different combination. You'll get a different third color or a different fourth color depending on what halftone you use. Here Rick Roth is talking about completely curing. He gives 9 different possible problems of why you're not curing the shirt and why it falls off. And he's got, just checklist of check this, and check that. Thanks to the Ink Kitchen.
That's good. I mean,
wraps up
I know C.J. Mitka, who's the editor of Wearables. Nice guy, and they're really. I think in the last 6 months they've stepped up their game. They're kind of, for a while it was really fluffy articles. I thought they did some contests and they had only a half a dozen entries in some of these contests, but they've really stepped their game up. And so the fact that Ink Kitchen's in it, I think that's very interesting. Impressions needs to probably look over their shoulder. Maybe they will. Hey, you know how that goes. It goes. Anyway, good. That's our show. We're going out with Billie Holiday, her 100.
The Man I Love.
Is that the name of the song? I told you I don't know much Billie Holiday. We hope you enjoyed the show. We have a good time doing it, and we try to give you some meat this time. So we're gonna leave with a little bit of Billie Holiday here. Thanks for tuning in. See you guys later.